we're going to look about the relationship between how people do in life and our expectations about them, and how what we expect of people can discourage or inspire people. So the first point is that we have feedback. The first point is that we have expectations about everything all the time. Are you ready? Are you sure? All right. So we always have expectations about everything and everyone all the time. And now there's echo again. All right, hopefully that's okay.
That next button, yeah, that you reduce. Yeah, 0.
Okay. That better?
Yeah.
All right. So sometimes our expectations are not realistic. Now, our expectations impact ourselves and others. So I'm sure you've all heard of the placebo effect.
Yeah.
Do you know that 30% of people will get better by taking a placebo? 30%. That's even true for surgeries. They sometimes do placebo surgeries, and 30% of people will get better. Amazing, isn't it? There's also what we call the nocebo effect. That means if you think something's going to hurt you, even if it's nothing, that you will feel pain or you'll get sick. Again, it's 30%. That's why in all standard medical trials, they have to compare the medicine or the procedure to something that people believe is a medicine or believe is a procedure, but isn't. And nobody knows how and why this happens. It's well documented, but nobody knows how. So our expectations even affect our physiology. We expect that something's going to make us better. We expect that something's going to make us worse. And it changes even gross physiology. And about people, if someone says, oh, you know, hey, I had this kid in my class last year and he was a real problem. He's going to be in your class this year. He's going to be a problem. And the teacher expects he's going to be a problem. So this system, this whole system of expectations, I first learned in person from Dr. Wilkinson. And he was telling a story of himself when he first became a college professor. So he said when he became a college professor, first year teaching, so in the registrar's office, one of the secretaries said to him, I can't believe they gave you section 2. You're a new professor. How could they have given you section 2? He said, what's different about section 2? And they said, that's the best and the brightest. These were the kids who were absolutely the top in high school. They usually only give them to the most seasoned, best professors. So Dr. Wilkinson, oh, wow, this is very interesting. He said, I wonder if there's actually going to be any difference, right? So as he's going through the semester, he's noticing his section 1, section 3, they're enthusiastic, they're learning, but his section 2 was amazing. The kind of questions they asked, how responsible they were in getting their work done. It was just a joy to teach them. So it's about halfway through the semester and he meets the dean of the college. He's on the way to a faculty meeting and he meets the dean and the dean says, so how are you doing? And he says, well, Dean, I just love teaching. I'm so happy I went into this profession. I'm having a great time. He said, and section 2 is amazing. And the dean stops and says, tell me about it. So he starts saying, you know, well, they're just so responsive. Their work is at high. He's going on and on and on. The dean says, we don't have a special section 2 this year. And Dr. Wilkinson, he didn't know what to say. He said he didn't go to the faculty meeting. He said he went first back to his office and he took out the compositions and the exam papers and he's looking at them in section 2. They were writing twice as much Their grades were higher. And he went back to the registrar's office and he said, aren't there special kids in section 2? She said, oh, it was like that for the last 20 years. But this year we decided to take the high achievers and scatter them all over. I had a kind of a opposite experience when I was trying to learn spoken Sanskrit. Well, I was running a Gurukula, and Prabhupada said that if you don't teach Sanskrit, it's not a Gurukula. And we had Gopi Puranadana Prabhu as our Sanskrit teacher at one point for a couple years, and then he moved. And I'm like, oh boy, okay, there's no one else. I'm going to have to learn Sanskrit. So I was studying various courses, and then I signed up for, you may be familiar with the Sanskrit to Bharatiya, where they teach spoken Sanskrit. So I was studying their materials, and then I went to their immersion camp, which was in Northern California, and they purposely had it in a very remote area, so you couldn't access phone or anything. You know, we were very isolated. You could use like a payphone, old-fashioned payphone. Anyway, so there were about 70 people there, and only 5 of them had my color skin, and the other 4 who were white, they were like married to Indians. So I was the only white person there who was just white. And they said, okay, we're going to have 3 groups. They said, first group is for the beginners who don't even know the Devanagari alphabet. But I had already been studying Sanskrit on my own for maybe a year and a half. They said the middle group is for those who don't know any Sanskrit, but they know Indian languages. And the third group is for people who are advanced, who can already speak and write in Sanskrit. So I thought, well, I guess I belong in the middle. You're being very distracting, by the way. I thought, well, I guess I belong in the middle group. So I went up to the teacher at the beginning, and I said, I don't know any Indian languages, but I know some Sanskrit. He said, well, I guess that will even itself out. But what turned out was that everybody else in that group had been brought up in India, and they had they'd been taught some Sanskrit in school. So they all knew as much Sanskrit as I did, plus an Indian language. And as soon as I realized that, I went back to the teacher and I said, I'm definitely below everybody else here. Okay? Is that clear to everybody? Mm. All right. So that teacher was one of the best teachers I've ever had. Just an absolutely fantastic teacher. All of his technique, his knowledge was just the top of the top of the top. Excellent, excellent, excellent teacher. So his main technique was he'd teach a particular grammatical form and he'd give some examples. And then he'd ask us to think of our own examples using our own vocabulary. So up until that point in my life, I'd always been one of the top students in any class that I had in any subject. But in this class, I felt that I was the lowest in the class. And so he'd ask us to think of something, and I didn't want to raise my hand until I felt sure. So I would say it in my mind over and over. And then when I'd raise my hand kind of like this. And he never called on me. He would call on other people, and then as soon as I would start to raise my hand, he'd go on to the next thing. And this was happening. And after like 3-4 days of this, I thought, I shouldn't be here. What am I doing here? Why was I such a fool as to think that I could come and learn spoken Sanskrit? It's useless. I'm hopeless. I'm a failure. I mean, it was just like, I was just pouring all this negativity in my brain, and my stomach started hurting all the time. And I was just basically just completely miserable. And I thought maybe I should just go home. And I kept feeling like I wanted the earth to swallow me. And just like, so this went on for 7 days, and it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then on the 8th day, they moved the teachers around. So we got the teacher from the advanced class, and I hadn't talked to him at all. I had nothing to do with him. So he didn't know anything about me. And he didn't wait for students to raise their hand. He just called on people. So he would do basically that. He wasn't actually even as good of a teacher, but he would do a similar technique that he would give an example, a particular grammatical example, and then he would just call on you to give an example. So he called on me as much as he called on everybody else. And when he called on me, guess what? I was, what do you think? I was able to give the answer every single time. I didn't learn that much about Sanskrit in those 9 days, but I learned a lot about expectations. The teacher expected me not to be competent, and so I wasn't. Even though altogether he was an excellent teacher, and a teacher who expected me to be competent, I was. And I left those 9 days, I'd already been a teacher for many years at that point, and I left those 9 days thinking, wow, what we expect about people makes a huge difference. They impact, they come from past experiences, they influence the present, they impact the future. Now, I got to a point in my career where I was a school principal. Altogether, I was a school principal for 18 years. I was an assistant principal in a large government school for 1 year. And I would supervise the teachers. And I remember one class where I went in to give an evaluation. The teacher had different reading groups. Again, like the slower group and the middle group and the advanced group. And what you noticed was that with the slower group, the teacher would lean back. When the teacher would ask a question, if the students didn't answer it immediately, the teacher would just give them the answer. With the more advanced group, they would lean forward. They'd ask a question. If people didn't immediately know the answer, they'd wait. They might ask like another leading question and then wait. Then give another hint and then wait. And the teachers weren't even aware of these kind of subtle differences as to how they were showing their expectations. That first teacher who didn't call on me thought he was doing me a favor by not calling on me. Right? So it's not malicious. Most of the time, it's not malicious. And often it's not even conscious. How am I impacting others by what I expect of them? Now, we may have this expectation as devotees of Krishna with how people are dressed. Right? We look at someone like, okay, that's a devotee. All right, that's not really a devotee. Oh, this person probably knows nothing about Krishna. Right? We have these kind of expectations. And they can go in various directions. Where I stay in America, we had one visiting devotee who gave this very esoteric Sunday feast lecture all about Radha Krishna's affairs. And he asked me afterwards, what did I think? And I said, Prabhu, I thought it was very inappropriate for a Sunday feast. I said, you're looking at the audience, and I said, most of them are brown, but some of them are not even Indians, they're Latinas. And you're thinking they're Indians, but they're not. I said, and even among the Indians, some of them are just Hindus. They don't know anything about Vaishnavism, and even many of the devotees don't know half these books you quoted. And they don't know what you're referring to. They don't even know what you're talking about. I said, maybe there were 5 people in the whole room who had any idea of what you were talking about. And actually had the qualification on any level. And you're just looking at people and think, oh, yes, they're all like this. You know? So we don't have to state our expectations. It's not that we have to say, I think you're stupid. Or I think you're smart, or I think you're competent, or it's not that we have to verbally state them. They still impact people, and they can impact people very directly. Now, our expectations will impair others if they're too high or too low for too long. If they're too high or too low for too long. If they're too high or too low for too long. If we set our expectations too high or too low for too long, people will be adversely affected. All right. Now I'm going to teach you a method. So that's theory. I always like to teach theory first and then go to method. So that's the theory. Now we're going to have a method by which you can help grow a person's expectations of themselves appropriately. Would that be okay? All right. Now, one thing I will tell you about this method, now I'm assuming that a psychopathic person could use this in a manipulative manner, but I have never seen a normal human being be able to use this manipulatively. because it's one of the questions people ask me. Well, could it be manipulative? My experience with this is that if you actually follow this method, again, unless you're really wacky, if you're a sociopath or a psychopath or something, but unless you're really messed up, using this method, basically you have to become genuine. It just you can't use the method. I'm not going to say absolutely, but like 99%. You just can't use this method in a way that's not genuine. And I found that even when people know that you're using this method, they're still positively impacted by it because you can't do it superficially. All right. So there's 4 and sometimes 5 parts to this. Examine, expose, emotion, expect, and endear. And we're going to go through these one at a time. So first, examine. Pay attention to people. We often don't pay attention to people. Mostly we're paying attention to ourselves. We don't usually pay attention to people who are very close to us. We often don't notice what they're doing. Like, I spend a lot of my time traveling. I'm constantly changing locations, but even my children and adult grandchildren often don't know where in the world I am. They may even say, Mata, where are you now? And I'm like, I posted on social media. So we often don't pay attention to people. When we do pay attention to people, we often pay attention just to the results that they achieve. Are we fully in control of the results that we achieve? No. If I'm judged solely by results, that's not going to inspire me, because I know very well that when I get a good result, it's not all due to my cleverness or sincerity. And if I get a bad result, it's not all due to my stupidity and insincerity, right? You can be a very sincere person and work very hard, and things can fail anyway. Like Jatayu failed to stop Ravana from kidnapping Sita. It happens. And Ravana succeeded in building an empire of gold. So that's not really what we want to notice, but that's generally, if we notice anything about people, we tend to notice the result. What we wish other people would notice, and what takes more effort to notice, is the sacrifices they've done to try to get the result. That's what Krishna notices. Krishna notices one's intention and one's devotion and one's effort. He's not actually so interested in the external result. It's right. Krishna says there's 5 factors for any result. Only one of them is our own effort. So to pay attention to people's sacrifices, to pay attention to what's behind the scenes. Not just that someone cooked a nice meal, but that they're cooking a nice meal that has, okay, maybe they had to do some research on the different recipes, or maybe they had to learn for many years about how to cook like that, or maybe they had to go and buy some special ingredients, or how many hours did they put in the kitchen. That kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing, again, we wish people would notice. Yeah? I know myself that when people say nice things about me, it's very, very rarely about the things that are really important to me. Like, it happens, but it's unusual. I'll do some presentation, and I might have spent a week just researching one of those verses and the Sanskrit in that verse and how it was explained and how the acharyas commented on it. And somebody will just say, oh, that was a pretty PowerPoint. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. To notice that kind of a thing. What's underneath? What's hidden? By the way, in family, noticing that kind of thing is very important. Especially the things that go on day after day after day after day after day. that we may stop noticing altogether because they're just part of our life. Oh, the house is always clean. But that takes care and attention and time and energy. And even just saying, oh, the house is clean is very different than, wow, I see that even, between the banisters on the stairway, that there's never any dirt accumulating there. Must be something you get to every week. Right? That kind of thing. So to really notice. Now, this next thing is very tricky. Again, most people don't notice. And when they do notice, they get this part wrong. Now, I'm going to be a little vulnerable here and tell you that I was in the Hare Krishna movement for a very long time before I realized that the 4 defects of the conditioned souls also applied to me. I mean, I knew theoretically they did, but I'm not going to say how long it was because they'll be even more embarrassed, but I used to believe that whatever I thought was the same as reality. In fact, I didn't even know that I thought that. I just accepted that whatever I perceived and whatever I thought about what I perceived was reality, was objective reality. That to me was just obvious that it was. And at one point I understood what I'm perceiving with my senses and how I'm understanding that with my mind is not the same as objective reality. It never is the same as objective reality, ever. I'm always perceiving something different than objective reality. And I'm not just going by my sense perception. I have an opinion about what my sense perception means. And I take what I believe my sense perception means as what actually happened. If someone is late, I decide that means they don't care. They don't care about me. They don't care about their duties. And I believe that their not caring is the truth. And I never even become aware that I'm making an assumption. I don't even know I'm making an assumption. I just think I'm perceiving truth. So when I understood that that's the process, I was like, oh my God. I was just staying at the Home of Some Devotees in Sydney, and they have a big sign up on their wall, do not believe everything you think. So when we say state what the person did, what most people are going to jump to here is they're going to state their interpretation of the meaning of what somebody did. Don't do that. So you're going to notice, wow, you've come early for the last 5 classes. You're saying something you can see with a camera. That's why we have a camera and a microphone in this picture. What you can see with a camera or what you can hear with a microphone. I noticed that you come early for the last 5 classes. That's very different from, I noticed that you're very responsible. Now, what happens when someone says to me, Urmila, you're very responsible? I don't know about you, but what my mind goes is, well, you don't know about that time and that time. And my mind will start finding all the examples of where I wasn't responsible. And so when someone says that I'm responsible, I don't actually digest that. Are you all with me? Like if I say to any of you, Prabhu, you're such a sincere devotee. Do you accept that? He accepts it, but none of the rest of you do. But do you follow what I'm saying? It just doesn't work. You're like, God, I'm not very sincere. I was totally spaced out the other day when I was supposed to be paying attention. You'll think of all the times you weren't sincere. And because none of us are perfect, as soon as someone tries to tell us something like that, it doesn't work. And we feel like the person is flattering us and manipulating us in some way. It actually feels very uncomfortable. You know, like someone said to me a few weeks ago, "Oh, Urmila, you're totally above the modes of material nature." And I thought, even Vasudev talking to Krishna and Balaram said, "I'm just a conditioned soul under the modes of nature." Like, why do you think I'm above the modes of nature? And immediately I'm thinking, what do you want from me? So don't do that. This is the hardest part of this whole process. Don't give a judgment. Don't give an interpretation. Just what you see with the camera, what you hear with the microphone. I see you cook 10 different preps. You just see that. I see that every time you dress the deities, you make half the garlands yourself. Are you following what I'm saying? Yes? I see that whenever you bring your child to the program, you bring something quiet for them to work on. Something you actually see. And it's got to be real. If you're going to say every time, make sure it's actually every time. Something you can see with a camera and hear with a microphone. Objective fact. If you get this wrong, nothing else works that I'm going to teach you tonight. So you got to make this distinction. By the way, making this distinction in general in life will really help your relationships. Just in general, to not take your interpretation of facts as reality. First of all, we may perceive reality wrongly in the first place. I might not even be perceiving rightly, and then taking my not perhaps right perception, my interpretation of what it means may be way off. Have we had people do that to us? Have we had people misinterpret the meaning of something that we did or something that we said? You know, we did something, we said something, and they say, well, this means this, and this means it. I'm like, no, that wasn't what I was thinking at all. That wasn't what I was feeling. That wasn't what I was intending at all. Well, that's what you did. Well, that wasn't actually what I did. And how painful that is. And then trying to explain to somebody or argue with them and trying to say, well, actually, that I did something different. I heard that's what you did. Well, it's like that's your interpretation of what I did. It's not actually what I did. So if we can make this distinction, I do not perceive objective reality accurately, and my interpretation of the meaning of reality is never exactly the same as reality. So just describe what you perceive. Now, how do you feel? Now, you're trying to pick something positive here, folks, because this is the ways you're trying to encourage people. So how do you feel about it? So, wow, you've come early for the last 5 programs, and you've helped me set up. You brought a prep. Okay, so you notice that that's what the person did. You described what you could see with the camera, hear with the microphone. Now, how do you feel? I feel, that makes me feel encouraged. It makes me feel supported. It makes me feel inspired. You follow? How does it make you feel? And you've got to make sure you get a feeling there. This is also a struggle for a lot of people. Like a lot of people, the only feelings they know are like happy, sad. So, try to increase your feeling vocabulary. Makes me feel proud of you. It makes me feel encouraged. Now, You're going to get to an interpretation, but this is future, and it's not stated as a fact. And you're using the word becoming. So instead of telling someone in the beginning that they're sincere, I believe that you are becoming a sincere devotee of Krishna. Now, I can eat that. You follow? If someone says, Urmila, I see that you spend an hour or two planning for your classes, that you come to your classes prepared and doing the research. And when I see that, then I feel inspired that I'm going to take time preparing for my service. I really feel that you're becoming a sincere follower of Prabhupada. I'll take that. But if you say to me, oh, Urmila, your classes are nice, you're such a sincere devotee, I'm like, that doesn't do it for me. Do you understand the difference? Okay. I see that you are becoming. I see that you're becoming a really responsible husband. I see that you're becoming a real pillar of the community. I see that you are becoming. You're giving them something to grow into. It should be something related to what you've seen, right? Don't make it super small that it's not necessarily what they want to become. Big enough like that. And then if appropriate, you can make eye contact, you can smile, or you can touch them, or you can hug them, if that's appropriate, depending on the relationship. Okay, examine, expose, emotion, expect, and endear. Okay? Prabhu, when I was hearing earlier about dealing with all the legal issues with the temple, and I've dealt with legal issues with built 2 schools, so I know something. But what you were describing was like, how many legal issues was that? At least 5 different legal issues, and some of them very serious. And I'm sure that what that meant was that you were going to the government offices over and over again, right? Zoom meetings. Did you ever go in person or all Zoom? All Zoom. And filling out lots of paperwork, right? Online, in person, mailing them in, and then they're probably asking you to repeat it again, right? That form wasn't filled out right, or we don't accept your thing, and then you have to do it again. And did you ever have to pay any fines? No, hopefully no fines, okay? But there was some risk of that, right? And you had that risk that maybe I'm going to have to pay a fine, and maybe I'm personally going to get in trouble for other people's mistakes. And still you're going on. You haven't quit. And you're still trying to go on and get this, although you don't even see how it's going to happen. And when I was hearing all of that, I felt very humbled in my own service. I felt, wow, this devotee is doing things more. I probably would have quit. And I felt very inspired to go on with all of the obstacles in my own service. And I really believe that you're becoming the kind of person that Srila Prabhupada wanted us all to be in his service. So thank you very much. Did you see how that works? And you see how it's almost impossible to do that manipulatively? Because as soon as I really meditate on what someone's done, I naturally, genuinely feel appreciation. Is that clear? Again, I'm sure that crazy people could fake this. But if you're a normal human, as soon as you actually think about and verbalize the underneath sacrifices, if when Prabhuji gets all this done, people will say, yes, you got this done, but they'll just look at that, right? But the person actually, did that feel inspiring? Isn't that interesting? Even though it was a demo of what I just taught, that it always fascinates me. Because you can't do this fake. Again, maybe, but generally you just can't. It's real. So employ opportunities purposely. Look for opportunities. Look for open doors. Look for opportunities where you can help inspire and encourage others. Seek them out. Have we all also done so many things that other people could have appreciated and nobody saw them at all? Isn't that weird? Like you're just thinking, don't you notice? So look for things. Have your radar open for what are people are doing. And sometimes you have to think about what might be the backstory. By the way, I years ago, there was a flight path I took over and over again, and I always had a layover where I had to stay overnight in a particular place. Just was the first flight would always come in so late that there were no connecting flights that day, and it was the only flight that went there. Anyway, and that temple was a temple where people were always arguing with each other. I don't know if it was something in the water or what it was, but they were always having these fights. And I'd been trained in mediation, and so at one point they said to me, "Would you come and mediate?" So we brought all the groups together. There were even people brought lawyers. I mean, this was really serious stuff. And we just went around and had people do this with everybody. To just, name the underneath the hidden sacrifice. So I started out with a few of the people. And then everybody did this for everybody. Everybody was crying. And afterwards, the lawyers came up to me. They said, for 2 years, we got nowhere with this. Said, we've never seen this kind of change happen. So to look for those sort of things. Look for the opportunities. And be creative. You don't always have to do this verbally. You can do it in notes, phone calls, something in the mail. Pick your words carefully. If you're going to look at someone, have direct eye contact. Unless you're in Japan, then don't do that. Have careful body language. Make sure your body language is in harmony with your words. And then express emotion appropriately to the particular relationship you have with that person. Set your expectations confidently. That from what you observe, you can expect that this is going to happen. Yes? Okay, let's look at some examples. Some examples from Srila Prabhupada. Now, this is not always exactly in the same order. This is a letter. It's over two slides. I am so glad to hear, so I'm glad how I feel, that you are released now. This I expected when you came to see me. I entrusted the matter to Krishna to give you release. Anyway, Krishna has been so much merciful upon you that he has taken you out of the state laws. So in every kind of miseries, we have to depend on Krishna, and we should not be too much disturbed when such miseries come upon us. You have shown very great example in sticking yourself to chanting Hare Krishna while you were in tribulation. Follow this practice all along your life, and surely Krishna will accept you into the kingdom of God, back to Godhead. Your strong desire to serve me is very beautiful. Your serving me means serving Krishna. I am also your servant, so I cannot accept your service from you or from any of my disciples. I accept service from my disciples on behalf of Krishna. But if we look at this letter, right, he's talking about what he did. He was chanting Hare Krishna even when he was arrested. And Prabhupada was very glad. Right? And he was saying, follow this and you will certainly be accepted into the kingdom of God. So he's observing something very specific, giving his emotions, right? And giving this future expectation. Okay, here's another one to Yamuna. But I am very much happy for your nice spiritual sentiments. In London, there may be a temple or not. It does not matter. You are doing very nicely, more than having a temple. If Krishna gives us a better temple, that is all right. Otherwise, your engagement in kirtan is very, very nice. It's nice for you too. Huh? So continue this program in cooperation with your other God brothers and sisters, and Krishna will make you very happy. You six together are doing so nicely that I am very much proud of you. Be blessed by Lord Sri Chaitanya, and go on like this. So he's talking about the specific sentiments that she gave in her letter and doing the kirtan. Prabhupada said that he's proud, he's happy, and he's proud, right? And it's going that your engagement is very nice and you'll be blessed by Lord Chaitanya. And you notice Prabhupada's making this independent of result, whether you get a temple or not. He's looking at the emotion she has. He's looking at the kirtan. Here's another one. I thank you very much for installing Radha Giridhari. From my childhood, I was very much fond of Radha Krishna, and now my good disciples are helping me to open so many Radha Krishna temples all over the world. It gives me so much pleasure. Now introduce Rath Yatra. That was my childhood activity. I want to see my disciples all over the world introduce 2 items, opening Radha Krishna temples and Rath Yatra festivals. Do this under the protection of Guru Garanga. Please do everything cooperatively, for you will be happy, your countrymen will be happy, and all living entities will be happy. So Prabhupada's talking about very specific things, him installing the deities, and that Prabhupada's saying, I thank you, right? We talked about the endear at the end, and I thank you, that he's very happy. And Prabhupada is saying that you and your country and everybody will become happy. I have studied your activities while in Honolulu, and it gives me great pleasure to find out such a devotee, that should be A, not S, such a devotee qualified as you are in our society. I wish you will execute responsibilities in the future in the matter of our society's multi-activities. So again, he's projecting into the future. I've studied your statements in the papers, and you have repeated my ideas, and at the same time sounded like a politician, and this combination is very effective. You are certainly the right man for this preaching work. Prabhupada was asking devotees to get into politics. They have taken you as a serious candidate for political office, and according to your statement, you feel you may even win. So I am very much encouraged by this political field in America. The people there are very intelligent, and they take your statements seriously. I do not need to tell you to push on with this work in serious concentration, because I see you are already very determined. So you can see again all these factors. Now, the Lord also uses this same. Here we see the Lord teaching to the Prachetas. He says, my dear sons of the king, I am so pleased with your mutual friendship, because you have with pleasure accepted within your hearts the orders of your father, and have executed these orders very faithfully. Your attractive qualities will be celebrated all over the world. So a few questions. So why do we sometimes expect the worst out of people? Anyone's thoughts? Why do we metaphorically cut off people's wings? Yes?
Because we probably do not endeavor to put that effort into
noticing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one reason. We don't put the effort into noticing. Any other reasons why? Yeah.
Maybe we would have observed something where they didn't perform and then set that as an expectation.
Okay. So we observed something where they didn't perform, and then that colored all of our expectations negatively. Now, it's interesting you say that. So let's say you have someone who's doing poorly in general, and you want to help them. One of the things, it's not the only thing, but one of the things you can do is find something that they're doing right. You find something that they're doing right. There are other techniques as well, but that's one of them. So, for example, when we would teach little children handwriting, how to form their letters. So one of the things we would do is point out any letters that were formed correctly. Let's say they had a whole page of S's. So you find, and suppose you couldn't find any letter that was perfect for the whole letter. You find a part of a letter. That's, oh, look, you did this under this part of this S was perfect. Oh, and this part of this S was perfect. And this part of this S was perfect. And this one, look, it's almost just right. It just went a little too low, but if you had had it just a little bit higher. So you point out those kind of things. So if you find somebody who in general is a problem, but you can find something that you can focus on that's right, that you can grow. Any other reason? Yes?
Could it be a form of self-protection because it's emotionally easier?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yes.
I guess we are hardwired as humans to see the negative sides because of the way we have evolved to our minds.
Now, that's also interesting, that we are hardwired to see the negative. That's actually a fact. Now, there's a biological self-preservation aspect to noticing the negative. So if you're walking out through the bush, now here you don't have any snakes, right? You have no snakes. Such a nice place, New Zealand. It's also a cold place, especially for people from India, unless you are from the Himalayas or something. But don't worry, in New Zealand they don't believe in cold. They think it doesn't exist, and if you just say there's no cold, then there's no cold. And it's not a problem. You just have to change your mentality a little bit. But if you're, if you're walking out in the jungle, you don't want to just notice the birds and the butterflies. You want to notice the tigers and the snakes. If all you notice are the birds and the butterflies, you're going to die. So our brains are hardwired. I don't know whether Krishna personally did it or Lord Brahma did it, but one of them hardwired us to notice negatives for self-preservation. We actually have to do that. We have to be alert to danger more than to safety. Again, you have to notice where there's holes in the road. You can't just notice the white line in the road. You have to notice the holes also. But if we're aware of that biologically we are actually wired to notice what's wrong, then we can make a conscious effort in dealing with other human beings to notice what's right. And to realize that noticing what's wrong is not, and just noticing what's wrong is not truth. Does this make sense to everybody? It's not truth, or it certainly isn't the whole truth. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but do we all do things that are wrong? Yeah, of course we do. Do we all do things that we know are wrong when we're doing them? Yes, of course. If we didn't, we wouldn't be human. I was having a consultation with one devotee the other day, and he was saying, my whole life is a failure. And I'm like, did you rob a bank? Like, what? His whole life was a failure because he fell in love with the wrong person and ended up not even marrying her. And I said, well, at least you called it off before you married her. And I said, it doesn't make your whole life a failure. I said, it just makes you human. That's all. I said, and not only are you human, you're a human in Kali Yuga. Like, I don't know what you expect of yourself. I said, we're all pure souls, but we're also right now we're Kali Yuga humans, and we're all pretty messed up. In some ways, just right. So if I'm just going to focus on the other faults of all the other Kali Yuga humans, first of all, I'm going to be very busy. But also, it's not a realistic, holistic view of people. I certainly wouldn't want people to view me just through the lenses of my mistakes and my mess-ups, right? That would be very sad. So I'd like to see other people with the same grace that I would like to be seen. And to see people with the same grace that Krishna has. Of course, seeing people with the grace that Krishna has, I don't know, that's pretty far beyond me. Like how he showed grace to Putana, I don't get that at all. I can't wrap my head around that. She came to kill you. It's like, isn't someone who's pretending to be a friend and coming to kill you worse than someone who openly comes to kill you? It's like, that seems worse to me. So Krishna has his own ways of understanding things that are far beyond. But Krishna sees this tiny, you're pretending to be my friend. How nice. You have a knife behind your back and you're smiling at me, but you're smiling at me. So Krishna sees that. But at least we can try to focus on something good, and there's something good in everyone.
So are you saying that we should sort of aim for that? Maybe not to the level of Krishna, but...
Well, if we're dealing with people we want to encourage, I'm not saying we shouldn't jail criminals because they've done something nice in their life. But if we're trying to encourage somebody in Krishna consciousness, we're trying to encourage someone in their life, then it's far better to focus on something they've done right rather than just focusing on their flaws. Now, if we're in a position where we're their parent or their teacher or their employer, we may also have to deal with flaws and try to correct them. That may be there. But here we're looking at how we can encourage people. You can never talk about everything in one class, you know.
Yeah. But I have a follow-on question from
Yes.
that. At what point do you give up? Because at some point it would start becoming a detriment to your.
I only give up on people who get stuck in a spiral of self-hatred with no desire whatsoever to improve, and who are just coming to me as an energy suck. Those are the people that I stop dealing with. So if someone is going on for months or years just simply self-hating and coming to me to get a pat on the head, you know, I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself, I'm coming to you to tell me I'm a nice person, and they don't make any effort to change no matter what I do, and this goes on over a long period of time. I had one person doing this with me, and I finally said, look, what I would like from you is a spreadsheet. I said, I want you to list in the first column all your problems. I'd like you to list in the second column what I've suggested you do about them. I'd like you to list in the third column what you've actually done about them. And I'd like you to list in the fourth column the result of what you tried to do about them. And if you give me that and you haven't gotten any good result from any of my suggestions, I am willing to go on working with you. Never heard from him again. So, you know, people like that I will give up on. So it's just, I have limited time, I have limited energy. And if people are trying to use me to stay in Tamagun, I'm really not interested in that. It's just, sorry. Sorry, not sorry, you know. I haven't had to do that very often. I mean, it's unusual. It's probably less than 5 people in my life that I had to say, just no. One person I had to actually block everywhere. You know. Another person just kept repeating, I'm sorry, I'm not the right person to help you. I'm sorry, I'm not the right person to help you. I'm not the right person to help you. I'm not the right person to help you. But that's in someone who's stuck in this cycle of they're trying to enjoy Karuna Ras in a very perverted Tamagun way. Prabhupada says everything we're doing is trying to enjoy rasa. You know, and maybe disgust also. So, yeah. But again, that's I find that unusual. And sometimes people seem like that for a while and do get out of it. So I have seen people who were stuck in this cycle of self-hatred, and where, like, whatever you would do, they would just pull themselves right down into this self-hatred. Or blaming others. They're blaming their parents or their sister. They would go back and forth between blaming other people and blaming themselves, but not productively. Not blaming themselves like, oh, I've done something foolish and I can learn from that and move on. But I've done something foolish and therefore I am hopeless. Other people have traumatized me, therefore I am hopeless. And I am so bad, therefore I am hopeless, and everything. And just, it's a Tamagun cycle. And I've seen people in that cycle who can get out of it. So I have seen that. The majority of people can get out of it, but sometimes people don't want to get out of it. There's a place, I'm not getting the words exactly right, but Prabhupada was saying, you know, if you don't want to cleanse your heart, if you want to leave things as they are, then you can't really do anything about it. So again, I have seen some people like that. You know, if people are like that, sometimes I'll just be very blunt and I'll say, I don't want to hear this anymore. I'm done. Just, we're done with this now. It's over. Let's move on to something else. Okay. And sometimes that works in a person. But most people, most of the time, will be very responsive to your noticing the bright spots and encouraging them. The vast majority of people, the vast majority of the time. Any other points on this? Yes.
What if you notice the downfall in someone else and you notice the same symptoms in this person?
You notice the what in someone else?
If you notice someone else doing things that this person is doing and you saw their downfall, then maybe you could expect the same downfall for this person.
You can sometimes use this technique negatively, but be careful. It's usually better to, as Prabhupada would say, fan the spark. So you can sometimes say, hey, I see you doing this and this and this. This makes me feel very frightened. This makes me feel very concerned. I believe you're involved in a downward spiral. And please do something about it. Please, let's make a change. So you can sometimes use the same thing to express concern about something negative. Does that make sense to you? Be careful you don't condemn the person, but you're focused again on what you can see with a microphone, what you can see with a camera and hear with a microphone. So that sometimes can be effective. Be careful about your relationship with someone before you try to do that. It can come across as that you're on some high moral platform and you're looking down at them. Be very careful. It's a dangerous place to be. There's a saying in Christianity, there but for the grace of God go I. In other words, I can see somebody else having problems and think, you are having problems. And then Krishna can show you, you can have the same problems. Sometimes you already have the same problems in another form and you don't see it. That's actually not so uncommon. That I see somebody else being irresponsible in a way that I am very responsible, but I may be being irresponsible in a different way that I don't see. So be extremely careful. You should make sure you're coming from a platform of humility and genuine concern and that you have a relationship with somebody where they'll actually hear you. Like I had one mother come to me the other day about her adult son and that she's concerned about what he's doing in his life, and she says, shouldn't I say something to him? And I said, well, if he wants to hear it. I said, first ask him if he wants to hear it. She said, well, he'll say no. I said, well, then it's no. I mean, he's now like 21 or something. I said, you want to think, what kind of relationship do I want to have with him when he's 50? I said, I have a son who's 50. You know, how you're dealing with him now when he's 21. But. I said, but if he's not going to listen to you anyway, what's the point? Is that okay? One of the austerities of speech is beneficial, and us to actually benefit others. And there's that offense, don't preach the glories of the holy name to the faithless. But that's not, that's an offense specifically to the holy name, but in general, giving people instruction that they don't want to hear is an offense. It's pride. And when I give someone instruction that they don't want to hear, and then of course they're not going to hear it, and so they're going to go do what they do anyway, and then I'm going to say, well, I told you so. It's just pure arrogance. So you can always test a little bit. You can always say, would you like to hear what I have to say? And then, very carefully, and just see how the person actually responds. Is that right? But most people don't like correction. Yeah? They just don't. People contact me often and ask if I will give them feedback on something they've written. And like you, I don't know if any of you noticed it, I was an editor for Back to Godhead for 30 years. So one of the hardest things with that was telling people they had a mistake in an article. Or to speak of telling them it was a philosophical mistake. I know we had this one article submitted by one of my godbrothers. And we all the editors loved the article. We wanted him to fix 3 sentences. And he didn't give it back. And then I saw him. And I'm like, Prabhu, why haven't we gotten your edited article? He said, well, you didn't like it. I said, no, we all loved it. We just wanted you to fix 3 sentences. And he said, well, I can't do that. You do. You fix it. You know, people will ask me, look at my book, look at my article, and 9 times out of 10, they ignore what I say. Or they get offended. You know? Recently one devotee said, Urmila, can you be an unofficial advisor on such and such major project? And I said, sure, as long as you will actually implement at least 10 to 15% of my advice. And he said, well, that's really a low number. I said, no, actually, it's a pretty high number. So be very, very careful if you point out negatives in people. Right? And why do we like bad news rather than good news gossip? I was once giving a class in ISKCON Soho. I don't remember what the class was about, but I know that this question had absolutely nothing to do with the class. So this person at the end of the class said, why are only 10% of Prabhupada's disciples active in ISKCON? And I said to him, where did you get your number? I said, A, where did you get your number? And B, how are you defining active in ISKCON? And then I ended up talking for 15 or 20 minutes about how we make up numbers. We just make up numbers, and if we put a number on it, then it sounds very authoritative. Especially if you have a non-rounded number. If you say, well, 23.7%, people figure you must be telling the truth. And I kept asking him, where did you get your number? Where did you get your number? Where did you get your number? I actually later asked my godsister Mahamaya, who keeps track of such things, and she said it's about 30 to 40% of Prabhupada's disciples who are still active in ISKCON. This was some time ago. And then I asked her, how do you define being active in ISKCON? I was once at a festival in Lithuania, and Bhaktivedanta Maharaj was speaking in Russian, and we had a translator into English. And he was saying, yeah, you know, in Russia, so many people, they get married, and then 1-2 years later, they're divorced. That was hyperbole. You know what all hyperbole is? When you're exaggerating to make a point? Okay, so this was being translated into English. So the next day, one of my godbrothers, who doesn't speak Russian, was giving a class in the same festival that I attended, and he said, you know, among the Russian devotees, they're all getting divorced after 2 years. I said, Prabhu, where are you getting this number? He said, oh, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj said it yesterday. I said, it was hyperbole. And then he went to Maharaj, and Maharaj said, yeah, that wasn't like a number based on research or anything like that. Meanwhile, the class is being recorded, you know. And then you can imagine how many people are going to be repeating this. So when this devotee asked me about, you know, the percentage of Prabhupada disciples who were active, I said, why do we, when we make up numbers, is it always negative? You know, people will say how many devotees get divorced. So I actually did research, folks. For my doctoral dissertation, I did a census of all the teachers in all the Hare Krishna schools in the world. At that time, in 2005. I asked them how many of you are divorced or widowed, combination of being divorced or widowed, 2%. Percent that were on a second marriage after being divorced or widowed, 1.7%. Now that's just the teachers, but still, 1.7%, that's a very small number. And when people talk, oh, there's so many people getting divorced, like, What? Your friends, maybe, you know, like 10 people. In those 10 people, maybe 7. But you can't say this is everywhere. Where's your numbers? Where's your research? What are you talking about? So why do we do this? Why do we pick on bad? We make stuff up. We're just making stuff up. Or we're repeating stuff that's real. Why do we focus on the bad? Any thoughts? Yes.
We feel happy if others are down.
Yeah. I like honesty. Thank you.
We like to make rackets.
We like to make rackets, that also. But Prabhupada said that the main difference... Oh, thank you. That's first class. Prabhupada said that the main difference between material and spiritual is in material you're happy when other people are unhappy, and you're unhappy when other people are happy. And the spiritual, see, Prabhupada says spiritual, you're happy at others' happiness. He said spiritually there's no sadness, but you're happy at others' happiness. And Narada Muni said if you act like that, you'll have no more material miseries. So this is again arrogance, it's envy. That I want to focus on other people's failures. Yes. Okay, then also expecting the best from ourselves. So, newsflash. You and I, we are all part of Krishna.
Haribo.
Haribo. Mama Gamsa Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta, Sanatana. We're all part of Krishna. My dear friends, if you don't like yourself, you don't like part of Krishna. Woo! And every part of Krishna is nice. So also have the best expectation of yourself. Now is that going to walk gradually over here, person to person? Thank you very much. Most appreciated. Oh, and it's even warm. Very nice. So there's a lot of evidence that practicing what we call self-compassion can actually cure yourself of disease. Self-compassion is very simple. It means you speak to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you care about. It's not wishy-washy. Sometimes we think that I'll only improve if I'm always beating myself up. But would you think that about somebody else? You know, we're so afraid that if we're nice to ourselves, then we'll just become lazy. So it's all right to say, well, I really did a stupid thing. Let me see how I can fix that for next time. That's fine. What's not fine is I'm stupid. Do you hear the difference? Yes? Oh, I forgot my keys again. Went out to the car without my keys. All right, maybe what I can do next time is put them by the door. Or put them next to my bag. You don't have to say, I'm such an idiot, forgetful person. So, to speak to ourselves with also some compassion. And think about how you'd want someone you love to talk to themselves. Like you wouldn't want your kids or your friend to say, I'm just a terrible, stupid, useless person. Right? Correct? Alright. So, you all know about Jayananda. We celebrate his disappearance day every year in May. Prabhupada said we should celebrate his disappearance day like that of the great acharyas. So, this is what he had written in his Krishna book. This is affirmations. You all heard of affirmations? So this was Jayananda's affirmations. You will quickly experience a new realm of mental poise and experience inner happiness even in the midst of the most trying circumstances. You will worry less and enjoy more. Your power of concentration, memory, understanding, and creativity will increase. You will work more energetically, more confidently, and efficiently, as well as relate better to people. And you will succeed more easily at whatever you try doing. At night you will fall asleep immediately, and in the morning you will awaken thoroughly refreshed with even less hours of sleep than you normally need. Consequently, you will understand the real purpose of your life and your unique role in creation. So that was his affirmation. Okay, so we have to examine, first examine, pay attention, expose what you can hear with the microphone or see with the camera, express your emotion, forecast the future, and then, if appropriate, something endearing. Okay, examine, expose, emotion, expect, endear. By the way, you know who expects the best of us? Krishna! Any overall questions, comments? Doubts? Corrections? Yes?
Mataji, you explained about the people think themselves low, but if some people thinks that whatever I'm doing is the best, in that case, how we can deal with them?
Oh, how do I deal with super arrogant people?
Yes.
I don't find quite as many of those people in the Hare Krishna movement. We socialize people in our movement very quickly that that's not an acceptable way to behave. So it's kind of hard to survive in our movement, especially if you vocalize that. Maybe if you think that way, but if you talk that way, you won't have any Hare Krishna friends very quickly. I mean, I don't see how you will last. We all think that way to some extent, by the way. Yeah? I think I'm the most important person in the universe, you know. But that's natural. And if we don't think that way about ourselves, we think that way about our group. You know, well, people from my country or my part of the country, right? Like, you're not going to go to one state of India and tell them they should be like people in another state. Yeah, you don't go to the people in Bengal and say, you should be more like the Tamils. You know? And you're not going to go to the Tamil Nadu and say, you should be like the Bengalis. I mean, it's not going to work. People are all thinking, my. So we all think that way internally. I became very aware of that one time because I was born and raised in New York City, but I joined the movement in Chicago, and I had someone once introduce me. So here's Urmila, who was born in Chicago, and immediately I thought, how dare you say Chicago? And then it was just such a funny thought. I'm like, Urmila, that's ridiculous. So we have that tendency. We all have that tendency. Don't worry about it. I mean, it's just like, that'll go. I mean, unless you're really extreme. Some people are really, really extreme. Then I'll just say, away from them, offer my respect from a distance. But except for the really extreme people, life does funny things to your ego, folks. Yes? Any of you who are older than 7? So, our grandiose view of ourselves, Krishna keeps going, really? Oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? Okay. So, there's life, and then there's chanting Hare Krishna. That works. After you keep chanting Hare Krishna for a while, taking prasadam and worshipping the deity, after a while you start saying, oh, I'm really a tiny speck in the universe. It's kind of hard if you're engaging in bhakti to think like that. I mean, you can if you really try, but you'd have to really work hard at staying arrogant and practicing bhakti at the same time. I mean, some people do it, but it's not easy. You're walking uphill. But if people are extremely in tamaguna, however it manifests. And if they don't want to get out of tamaguna, if they're really, really deep in tamaguna, they don't want to get out of tamaguna, However, whether it manifests as extreme self-hatred or extreme arrogance, it doesn't really matter. I wish you well, may you be happy. That's also humility, just saying, I can't help everybody. And some people, they may not even be extreme, but maybe they just don't like me or whatever. I can't help everybody. That's not... Krishna can help everybody, but I can't. That's okay. Krishna will help them somehow. He'll send somebody better suited or whatever. That's all. Anything else? I could take one or two more, and then I have a meeting at 8:30, so I have to be going. Yeah?
The follow-up question Madhavya asked.
Yes.
And what is the line of the arrogant and the person what he is doing is he thinks that is the way he is doing it. That is an arrogant, or how we can differentiate that the person who is doing his way things and going on his, and the person is not listening is an arrogant, or he's going on his way is an arrogant. How we can differentiate the...
I guess my differentiation is, how do people react when they've made a mistake? That's clearly a mistake. How do they react if they're corrected in some way? That's what I look at. Especially if you correct people with great respect and very gently, and how do people respond to that? And again, over time, because there's a tendency in all of us to react defensively when we're corrected. That's also biologically inwired. But how do they respond over time? I'm not just going to look at someone's initial response, because most of us have an initial defensive response to any kind of correct. You give full grace to that. I would never judge somebody on an initial response. But if you find over time that a person is never willing to admit wrong, or never willing to say that they can improve, because the negative is, I'm a terrible person. That may sound like they're willing to admit wrong, but if it's, I'm a terrible person and I can't change and I can't do anything about it, I'm just a helpless victim, that's not the same. I like Vaiseshika Prabhu's motto. He says, I live to be corrected. It's difficult to receive correction and not become defensive. That it's extremely difficult. Worth practicing, by the way. It takes deliberate, conscious practice to do that. But that you should start seeing that as people advance in Krishna consciousness. But that doesn't mean you should hit people over the head with heavy criticism to then see how they react. I mean, that's what Bhrigu Muni did. Bhrigu Muni wanted to see how Shiva and Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu reacted to increasingly heavy offenses. So it's not that you should intentionally go to someone and say, you're just a flaming idiot, to see how they respond to that and then judge them accordingly. But if there's a need like that, just see in life even, how do they respond? Are they always right? And then, I just whatever, all respect to you. But there's nothing you can do then. Krishna can do something, but at least I can't do it. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I have a meeting, I'm sorry, so I really do have to go. I gotta get to the car and drive. So thank you very much. Anything good here is due to the credit of Srila Prabhupada. Anything wrong here is my responsibility. Please take the good and leave aside the bad. Thank you very much for your hospitality. Thank you all very much for coming. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.